Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today it is time for part 16, I believe, of this record collection tour. We are just blazing through them right now, and this one is going to be a little bit of a special one. So part 13 was a tour through, a journey through my entire Elton John collection front to back, and that was what I dedicated the whole video for. And we're going to do the same thing here, and I think people are going to be a little bit surprised when they see which artist this is, although maybe you won't be surprised if you watch my video about, I think it's 12 musical works that shaped me. Hour-long video, I don't blame you if you didn't sit through the whole thing, but one of the works that I talked about on there was the song The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald by Gordon Lightfoot. Gordon Lightfoot passed away earlier this year, very sadly, genuinely one of the most one of the musical deaths that has impacted me the most. Gordon Lightfoot has left a huge impact on my life. I was very fortunate to get to see him back in 2019 when he played in Mankato, Minnesota. It was a really lovely show. Clearly, Lightfoot was, he was old. He was 80 at the time. His voice was pretty much gone. But he played, these songs that I have connections to, these songs that I love, and just hearing them performed by the man who wrote them, potentially the greatest singer-songwriter that Canada has ever produced. It was a really lovely thing. So Gordon Lightfoot, more so than almost any other artist, has made a huge impact on my life. So unsurprisingly, I have almost everything he's done on vinyl. Now, I say almost everything because, like Elton John, there is one exception here. I have everything that he did in his core period, so the 60s, the 70s, and through the 80s. His 90s and 2000s stuff were never released on vinyl. His 2012 live record, All Live, was technically released. I do not own that one. I also don't own, I think, either of the Gord's Gold compilations from the 70s and 80s. Part 1, which is like a lot of re-recordings of previous songs, plus the general recordings for some others. Gord's Gold Volume 2 has a lot of re-recordings on it. I don't own that one either. But then apart from that, the only proper studio album that I am missing is his most recent one, Solo. I just have not gotten around to purchasing that one yet. And admittedly, that one is towards the lower end of my Lightfoot records for probably obvious reasons, since it's a later career record and his voice was pretty weak at that point. But we'll do a Lightfoot discography ranking another time. For now, I'm going to go through each of these records, talk about them briefly, and just kind of share a bit of my love of Gordon Lightfoot. So we begin with the debut, of course. This was actually, I'll hold it up here. This was actually one of the last Lightfoot records that I got because most of his stuff you can get pretty readily in like a used record shop or something. Pretty damn easy to do. But this one eluded me for a really long time. I think I finally had to order it off of eBay. I think it was eBay. I don't think it was Discogs. Lightfoot's first 4 records were released on the United Artists label, and this record it's quite good. I don't know where it ranks as far as my United Artists records go, because I do really like all of them. But you definitely get the sense of what a talent he was as a performer, and as a songwriter too. Early Morning Rain is on here, which was the song that made him famous. But even the other tracks, like The Way I Feel, For Lovin' Me, I really like Steel Rail Blues, Ribbon of Darkness. There's some really strong stuff on here. I guess to me, he and the outfit that he worked with, because that's pretty much, I think, just a trio on that record, 2 guitarists and 1 bassist. I think they really kind of hone the sound in future records, and I think the songwriting really starts to evolve a little bit, and he gains more of an identity as a songwriter. And you already start to see that with his next release, The Way I Feel. I should say, if I didn't already, the debut was from 66. This is from 67. The Way I Feel is an interesting record because they do try to fill out the ensemble a little bit more. They add a couple of different guitars, they add some percussion, instruments to the affair as well, some drums, and they play around with the production style a little bit more than they did. John Court on production duties here. So you get some songs that have a lot of like echo on them, a little bit more of a haunting sound, which I think is interesting. Does it always work? I don't know. I don't know if I prefer the version of The Way I Feel on this record to the one on the original. I think that was kind of an unnecessary song to redo. And Walls at the beginning has kind of a little jokey moment towards the end, which is kind of funny. It's a little bit off kilter compared to the rest of the record, but then you just go into stuff like Softly, Crossroads, and A Minor Ballad, just back to back to back, are incredibly strong. Rosanna is really good. Song for a Winter's Night is beautiful. That's the song that he closed the live performance with that I saw him at, which was ironic because it was in July. And then Canadian Railroad Trilogy. I mean, you talk about these kind of epic Gordon Lightfoot songs, which admittedly there aren't very many of them. And Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald is the first one that comes to mind, but Canadian Railroad Trilogy is a hell of a song in its own right. Reminds me a little bit, not, I mean, it's going to sound like a bit of an odd comparison, but gives me slight vibes of Driving the Last Spike by Genesis, I guess. I kind of associate those two songs thematically together a little bit, which may or may not be appropriate, I suppose. Some people might think I'm really silly for doing that, and that's fine. 68 here with Did She Mention My Name? Completely different approach here. Completely different approach. This record features a whole orchestral backing for a lot of tracks, not every single track, but there's a much more kind of diverse approach to what he's doing here. Black Day in July is a politically themed song, which is very interesting. I think it actually got barred from radio play in some areas. The Last Time I Saw Her is beautiful. Magnificent Outpouring, Pussy Willow's Cattails, and then the title track is really breezy. It's such a different approach, and I think some people ding it for that, kind of knock it a little bit in their rankings for that. I don't know. Again, this at one point this was one of my absolute favorites. This was probably top 3, top 4 for me, and I don't exactly know where it sits there now. But it is one of the more unique records that he ever did, and has some really strong songwriting. Again, he's really kind of honing it at this point, and he will continue to do so in future records, I should say. I have Sunday Concert here. Actually, this is out of order. We're going to come back to Sunday Concert and talk about 1968's Back Here on Earth. The final studio record that he did with United Artists. I think some people say that this is like his most consistent record with United and thus maybe his least interesting. I can understand that, but I think as a songwriter, you really start to see where he is going to go in the next couple of albums. He's really writing some fire songs, some strong tracks. Don't Beat Me Down is a very fiery track. I love Long Way Back Home. The Circle is Small is a fantastic song. Cold Hands from New York is really good. Marie Christine is a really fun kind of sailing theme track. It's a solid album. I mean, his United stuff really does not miss. And it's only after he leaves United, and he goes to Warner Brothers. I don't know why I forgot that, but it's only at that point where it starts to get a little bit more hit or miss. He has some of his best stuff ever on Warner Brothers, but then he also misses the mark sometimes too, as we will find out. Okay, now we're talking about Sunday Concert from '69. This one's a gatefold, So I'll open that one up. Um, Interesting album. Again, kind of does what I really like some live albums doing at this time, where there are quite a few tracks on here. In fact, a lot of side one is songs that were not on studio albums. In a Window Pane, The Lost Children, Leaves of Grass, and Apology, and then Ballad of the Yarmouth Castle on side two. I really like that one. And I really like how he interprets and redoes the other tracks here, like Canadian Railroad Trilogy live. Great stuff. Great stuff. Lightfoot as a singer, you hear this in live settings at this point, less so later on. Lightfoot as a singer in his prime was fantastic. Just a really evocative singer, really great vibrato, and a really distinctive just diction, I suppose. He cuts through like a knife, and has a really great, I mean, when I think of his voice, and this is probably just personal context talking, but when I think of his voice, I think of a bard. I think of a storyteller. He just has a way of telling something, and it's not even necessarily something that he's experienced personally. He is like the people who would sing like Homeric epics back in the day. The people from whose lips stories like the Iliad and the Odyssey would be told. I mean, he is so descriptive and just tells these tales in a way that captivates you. And so much of that is obviously because of his songwriting. So much of that is because he was a classically trained vocalist to some extent. I mean, the guy sang in choirs and stuff like that, and was really, really good and really renowned for that as a youngster, I suppose. So I don't know. I think that's something that is underappreciated in his golden days. I will say towards the end of the 70s, whether it's because of smoking or aging or whatever, like his voice starts to thin out more and more. And it's not altogether that surprising that that's kind of around the time when I would argue his music starts to reduce in quality. This one is interesting. So I have 1970s Sit Down Young Stranger. Now I have two copies of this. Sit Down Young Stranger came out, and one song that was released as a single and ended up doing really well was on side two, actually immediately after the title track, a song called If You Could Read My Mind. It was such a big hit that Warner Brothers was like, well, we haven't had the record out that long, so we're going to rename it and reissue it under the name If You Could Read My Mind. Now, this copy is fascinating, and I'm actually really thankful I have it because I don't know how rare of a pressing this is, but on the spine, I don't think there's a way in hell you're going to be able to see this. But on the spine of the record, it actually still says Sit Down Young Stranger. But on the front, and then again on the back, it says If You Could Read My Mind. So clearly a very, very early pressing. If You Could Read My Mind is a terrific album. I've always thought it was great, but I really got into this over the summer when I was taking a trip over to Milwaukee. I think I may have spoken about that in some previous record collection videos. I got some great records out of that. Really got into that album during that trip. I don't know that there's a mediocre song on here. Minstrel of the Dawn has a lovely kind of string backing arranged by Randy Newman, which is interesting. You have Randy Newman contributing. He also does stuff on Approaching Lavender. Van Dyke Parks and John Sebastian are on here. Ry Cooder. There's a lot of big names that are contributing, and yet there's such subtle contributions because really the core of this is Lightfoot as a songwriter and as a performer. It's so effective. And the songwriting on here is top notch. I would potentially argue the best songwriting on any Gordon Lightfoot record. I think the entirety of side one, Minstrel of the Dawn, his rendition of Me and Bobby McGee, I think is really good. Approaching Lavender, Saturday Close, Poor Little Allison are all fantastic. Cobwebs and Dust is too. And then side two, I suppose you could argue it's a little bit of a soft ending, and that's maybe my one gripe with Your Love's Return and The Pony Man. But Sit Down Young Stranger is a great song. And If You Could Read My Mind is a fantastic, picturesque, cinematic type of ballad that stands among any ballads written during the 1970s, as far as I'm concerned. There's so many great renditions of that track out there, so much acclaim that it's received, and all for just great reason. Great reason. If You Could Read My Mind, fantastic album, but not definitely my number one. I think it's in contention, but there's one or two other records that could be as well. This is not one of them. Summer Side of Life from 1971. To me, this record kind of sticks out like a sore thumb in some ways. It's not sonically all that different from previous albums. I think the production is maybe a little bit worse, but I don't think these songs are up to snuff compared to other Lightfoot tracks, and I have a hard time recalling any of them. Cotton Jenny, I know, mainly because they played it at the concert. But to me, this is just a randomly weak batch of songs in a period that was really creative and really fertile for Lightfoot and for the people he was working with. So, I don't know. Not one of my favorites. This is probably bottom half Lightfoot if I were to guess. Don Quixote, one of two records that was released in 1972 by Lightfoot. This one is great. Again, a really strong batch of songs here. The title track is really kind of lightweight and fun. Christian Island, Alberta Bound is fun. Beautiful is a really beautiful song. I like The Patriot's Dream. But the best song to me on here is Ode to Big Blue. I just think the sonic things that they're doing here with kind of the echo on the guitar, and especially that bass by Rick Haynes. I mean, that bass kind of explodes out of the speakers sometimes, which is really like, it kind of takes you aback sometimes, and it's such a cool effect and such a cool bit of like equalization or whatever that they do to get that effect. It kind of sounds like sounds like a whale call in some ways. I don't know. Very effective, really lovely album, really strong album, front to back, great stuff. And I can probably say the same thing for Old Dan's Records from 1972. In a lot of ways, I think the strengths are similar, but this is not identical sonically by any means. This is very much Lightfoot leaning into country sounds a little bit, and in a way kind of prefacing what would become, well, the next record we're going to talk about. Again, the songwriting is really strong, more of kind of a guitar-driven focus, band-driven focus because of the country influences. I don't know what my favorite song is on here. Farewell to Annabelle, the title track, Lazy Morning are all really good. My Pony Won't Go, that one is very interesting just because of some of the chordal choices that they use. And that acoustic guitar is just like chef's kiss. Excellent stuff. So yeah, two great releases in 1972 alone. But they're kind of overshadowed a little bit because in 1974 he puts out what is undoubtedly his most famous and consequential record, Sundown. Now, Sundown might be my favorite Gordon Lightfoot record. Again, I think it's between this, If You Could Read My Mind, and there might be one or two other albums that I'd throw in there for consideration, maybe one of the United Artists ones. And it's not hard to see why, because to me this is, if it's not Lightfoot at the apex of his songwriting skills, it's pretty close. And the instrumental ideas that they're using here are very interesting. I really like Somewhere USA, High and Dry. There's a couple of songs that are pretty well known. I mean, he played like 4 or 5 of these songs from this record on his in his show when I saw him. But Sundown and Carefree Highway are probably the 2 most famous songs. I think both of those are excellent. Sundown, some Lightfoot harmonies, which you don't really, I won't say you don't hear them at all, because you definitely hear them in songs like the title track of Did She Mention My Name, has some great 4-part stuff in it. Summertime Dream has some songs with harmonies on it a little bit later. But Sundown is just so, it's a creepy song. It's a dark song in a lot of ways, so you have to deal with that in that sense. But I just love the sound of it. I think the vocal overdubbing here is so clean, so fresh. When you combine that with that hook, it's excellent. It's excellent stuff. Carefree Highway is great. Great bit of songwriting there. Seven Islands Suite is also really interesting. Again, a longer Lightfoot song where he's kind of exploring with structure a little bit. Really like that. The Watchman's Gone, another one that he played live. And yet, possibly my favorite song on here is a deep cut, Is There Anyone Home? I think that is so subtle in the things that it does well, in the kind of bits of song structure and chord progression. It's subversive in really interesting ways, kind of shortening, like the little like bridge section in the middle thing where it kind of plays on the verse structure a bit. It doesn't quite imitate it. And Lightfoot does a little thing where he imitates kind of the refrain, I suppose, but he does it in like a minor key to make it bluesy. I don't know, just little things that just fascinate me about that song, and I think it is full of them. And this album is full of them, really. It's fantastic. It's amazing stuff. And that album in particular was the soundtrack probably to my freshman year of college. The way I feel as well to an extent, but Sundown was on the turntable when my roommate and I were getting into record collecting for the first time. And Sundown was one of the records that he had, because he had heard good things about it and he liked a couple of the songs on it. And the rest is history. Here we are. 1975's Cold on the Shoulder. This is this is a very good album that I think suffers from comparisons with Sundown, because I don't think most of the songs on here stand up to what is on Sundown. You could argue that this is where he starts to get a little bit more adult contemporary, shall we say. But there's still some interesting tracks on here. The Soul is the Rock is a very interesting song. And I really like Now and Then. That's a great bit of songwriting, very much in kind of that Carefree Highway vein. I think that's great stuff. So don't sleep on that record. Don't sleep on that record. Oh, all right. And how about this? I lied earlier. I forgot that I own this. But here is Gord's Gold, the compilation record. Double album. This thing is beat to hell, it looks like. At least the cover seems to be. All the songs that Lightfoot did on United Artists that are included in this compilation are re-recordings. Because this was released on Warner Brothers, they didn't have the rights to the initial masters. So that's what they do here. Gordon Lightfoot, more like Taylor Swift, am I right? And yeah, double record. It contains most of the essential stuff. That first record is the United Artists stuff. The second record is the Warner Brothers stuff. Yeah, really good collection. Really good collection. From what I remember of the re-recordings, because it's been a while since I've heard them, I don't think they add much of anything. They're not bad, but they're not as much of an affront as Gord's Gold Part 2. The re-recordings on that album are sometimes a little bit embarrassing because of how much they welcome that late 80s sheen, that really cheesy late 80s production. I don't know. Not my thing. Summertime Dream from 1976. I would argue that this is the last Gordon Lightfoot record that I would describe as great. I think production-wise, they're really starting to slip into habits here that I'm not a big fan of. They're starting to add more synthesizers and stuff, and it all sounds a little bit more cold, a little less intimate than it did before. But the songwriting here, again, is where Lightfoot really stands strong. This was one that was really popular in the live show that I saw. I swear he played like 5 songs off of this record for whatever reason. This is the one with Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald on it. And Edmund Fitzgerald sonically fits into this. Like, it's not my favorite sounding song in the world, but it works for that song. It works so well. That guitar line is icy in a way that makes sense because, of course, the shipwreck took place in November, and the waters of Lake Superior, quite icy at that point. Very interesting because my brief tangent is that I was very into Great Lakes shipwrecks as a kid, growing up a couple hours from Lake Superior. Spent a lot of time up there, and so I knew about the Edmund Fitzgerald on some level before I ever heard of this song. But it's interesting to think that shipwreck, which, there's other probably more compelling stories of shipwrecks that have happened on Lake Superior over the years. This one, the mystery as far as what happened, I think, is part of the selling point, part of the fascination, and then obviously the fact that nobody survived. But it's interesting that this was a shipwreck that has become immortalized, that has become, dare I say it, somewhat of a household name. It's an interesting thing, and it's all because Lightfoot himself was fascinated by the story and wanted to kind of memorialize it in song form. Other stuff that I really like, I'm Not Supposed to Care. Never Too Close is nice. I really like Protocol. I think that's a great song. And Too Many Clues in This Room is nice as well. We then proceed to go from a pretty great album, really good album, to one of his biggest clunkers. And granted, it's been a little while since I've heard this one, but Endless Wire from 78 is the songwriting, to me, cannot overcome the production on this record by any means. It's too busy. There's way too much going on. Whole bunch of different instruments getting added to the mix. And as I said, I don't think the songwriting is near where it used to be. There's a re-recording of The Circle is Small on here, which doesn't add anything. It doesn't have the energy of the original by any means. Sweet Guinevere, again, kind of a strange thing because that was the song that opened the live concert that I saw. A very bizarre choice. It is probably one of my favorite ones. Daylight Katie too. But yeah, it's not the worst thing he ever did by any means. Because he still kind of has his voice on this record, although you could argue that it is weakening. But it's not great. It's not very good. And as we're winding down, 1980s Dream Street Rose is kind of an underrated record. But this one really sounds dated. But in a way that's maybe a little bit more tolerable, I suppose. I think the songwriting is better. I like Ghosts of Cape Horn. I like the title track. Make Way for the Lady. Kind of a somewhat bluesy little jam track. I like that one quite a bit, actually. And it's more mellow. It doesn't do as much to kind of actively annoy me as Endless Wire does. It's one of his more kind of straightforward and consistent records, which I do appreciate. All right. 1982's Shadows. Despite the borderline out of focus cover on this thing, this is actually quite a strong album. I don't know if I'd quite consider it great because this is really the point in time where you start to notice Lightfoot's voice declining. But some of the songs on here, like Shadows, Blackberry Wine, All I'm After, Triangle. I think he's got some really good songs, and this is kind of the last example that I have of Gordon Lightfoot contributing great songs. Also, I don't think the production suppresses this one as much compared to what came before, and fucking certainly compared to what came after. I think the production supports the tracks and doesn't date the album quite as aggressively. And I do appreciate that. So Shadows from 82, also one where he played a few songs from that one on in his concert, which I found interesting. He did not play anything from this album, though, and I don't blame him. 1983's Salute. The font right up here says it all, pretty much. Still not the worst thing he's done, but goddamn, this thing is busy. This is super dated. So many layers of synths. So much kind of... so many things being thrown in that don't need to be. There's some good songs on here that I think are crying to get out. I like Naughty Pine, for instance. I don't remember offhand any other real standouts, but production kills this album to me. Really just kind of dilutes any influence or any intrigue that it really has. And Lightfoot at this point is 45, so he's very much entered middle-aged status. I mean, he was doing like films and stuff like that at this point. I don't remember the name. I remember there was one film that I caught like a portion of where he's a leading role in it. This like Canadian film. Kind of strange and very strange to kind of see that come up randomly on TV. I'll try to think of the name. If I remember what it is, I'll link it in the description. Not that he had a whole lot of film roles, so you'll be able to find it out. And then we end this on a very ignominious note with 1986's East of Midnight. So the last record that he released on vinyl until solo, as I said earlier. Nope. This is probably my least favorite Gordon Lightfoot record. I will, I'm going to spoil it right there. I mean, you can tell from the cover on the front, you can tell on the cover on the back. Gordon Lightfoot is very middle-aged. This is a middle-aged man who is trying to enter the 80s with full gusto and trying to embrace that production style, that so dated adult contemporary 80s production style. I mean, it's an album of songs that sound like elevator music for the most part. Amazingly, he actually played one song off of here, Let It Ride, which, to be fair, was the most successful song commercially that he had had in a few years. But I don't really have anything to recommend. It's probably the only Gordon Lightfoot album that I actively dislike on some level. I will say for his other stuff, his 90s stuff does get better. His last two records, I think, are just kind of hampered by, he doesn't have the voice that he used to. And I think those records are very much just kind of him and his acoustic guitar taking center stage, at least with Waiting for You and A Painter Passing Through. There's more of an instrumental ensemble kind of backing him. But yeah, so he definitely peters out, does Lightfoot. I don't really think he has any true late career gems, unfortunately. Although his 90s records are not bad. I might add A Painter Passing Through, or I might volunteer that if we're talking about a late career, pretty good record. But in any case, that is it. That is my whole Gordon Lightfoot vinyl collection. I'm sure people will flock to that YouTube video name because I'm sure Gordon Lightfoot is a very compelling figure. But I wanted to make sure to give him his own video because I knew that I would be discussing all these records in some detail. So I appreciate you watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more videos are to come. Tell a friend as well. And I will see you all next time at your home right here on the Music Deep Dive.